You wake before dawn, not because you want to, but because if you don't, your family starves. The rooster hasn't even cleared its throat yet, but your body knows. It's March. The ground is finally soft enough to break. Your wooden plow sits waiting like a torture device that happens to grow food. Your ox looks at you with the same exhausted expression you're wearing. Neither of you signed up for this, but here you are, about to spend the next 9 months in a brutal dance with dirt, weather, and the constant threat of famine. Welcome to medieval farming, where every season is trying to kill you, and the only thing standing between your village and starvation is your ability to read mud like it's holy scripture. Spring. The desperate gamble. You're standing in a field that looks like God sneezed mud everywhere. It's early March, 1347. You don't know it yet, but in about a year, the Black Death is going to make farming the least of anyone's problems. But right now, you've got bigger issues. The ground is finally thawed enough to plow. You've been checking it every morning for 2 weeks, pressing your hand into the cold earth like you're taking its pulse. Too early, and your plow bounces off frozen soil like it's made of iron. Too late, and you've missed the narrow window where your barley might actually grow enough to keep you alive through next winter. You grab your plow. Let's be clear about this plow. It's not the metal marvel you're picturing. It's called an ard, and it's basically a pointed stick with delusions of grandeur. If you're lucky, really lucky, you've got an iron tip on it. Most likely, you've got hardened wood that you spent all winter preparing, knowing it'll last maybe half the season before it splits. Your ox, let's call him Brutus because why not, is having none of it today. He's been living on old hay and whatever grass survived under the snow. He's skinny, cranky, and about as enthusiastic about plowing as you are about another dinner of pottage. But you both know the deal. No plow, no grain. No grain, no survival. You strap yourself into the plow harness. Yes, yourself. Because here's the thing about medieval farming that nobody tells you. Half the time, you're the ox. Brutus helps when he can, but when he can't, you're literally putting your shoulder to the wood and becoming a human tractor. The first furrow is always the worst. The earth breaks reluctantly, like it's personally offended you're disturbing its rest. Your back screams, your legs burn, sweat pours down despite the morning cold. And you've got, what? Maybe 6 more acres to go? 7 if you're feeling optimistic about not dying. But here's where it gets interesting. You're not just randomly scratching lines in the dirt. You're following a system that would make modern farmers weep with its complexity. It's called the 3-field system, and it's the only reason half of Europe isn't dead from starvation. Field 1, that's where your winter wheat is already growing. You planted it last September, and if you're lucky, if the winter wasn't too harsh, if the snow actually insulated it instead of killing it, if mice didn't eat half of it, you'll harvest it in July. Field 2. That's what you're plowing now. This is for your spring crops, barley, oats, maybe some peas if you're feeling fancy. These will grow fast and give you something to harvest by August. Field 3, that one's resting, fallow, doing absolutely nothing, which seems like a waste until you realize it's the only reason the other 2 fields haven't turned into barren wasteland. The sheep and cattle are grazing on it, dropping their own special brand of fertilizer, giving the soil a chance to remember how to be soil again. You rotate these fields every year. It's agricultural genius disguised as desperate survival tactics. By the time you've got your fields plowed, and we're talking weeks here, not days, your hands are more blister than skin. But you're not done. Oh no, now comes the seeding. You've got a bag of seeds that represents literally everything. These aren't just seeds, they're next year's seeds too. Eat too many now, and next year you're plowing for nothing. Save too many, and this year you starve. It's a calculation that would make Wall Street traders sweat. You broadcast the seeds by hand, walking in careful lines, trying to spread them evenly. Too thick, and the plants choke each other. Too thin, and you're wasting precious field space. You're essentially gambling with grain, and the house always wins. But here's the kicker. You're not the only one interested in those seeds. The moment they hit the ground, it's a race. Birds descend like a biblical plague. You've got your kids out there with sticks and stones, running around like tiny, angry scarecrows. They're screaming, throwing rocks, probably crying from exhaustion. This is their job for the next 2 weeks. Miss a day, and the birds win. Then there's the weather. A late frost, dead seeds, too much rain, rotted seeds. Not enough rain, nothing grows. You're checking the sky constantly, reading clouds like they're fortune-telling cards. That weird ring around the moon? That means rain in 3 days. Red sky at morning? You're properly screwed. Meanwhile, your lord, who owns this land you're breaking your back over, sends his reeve around to make sure you're not slacking. You owe him 3 days of work a week on his personal fields. It's called corvée labor, and it's exactly as fun as it sounds. So while your own crops are fighting for survival, you're over on his pristine fields, using his better tools, planting his better seeds, knowing that if anyone's eating well this winter, it won't be you. By late April, tiny green shoots start appearing. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. It's also terrifying, because now you've got something to lose. Summer. The battle royale. It's June. The sun is brutal. You haven't stopped sweating since May, and you're pretty sure you've forgotten what it feels like to not have dirt under your fingernails. Your spring crops are now in full teenage rebellion mode, growing in every direction except the one you want. The weeds, though, the weeds are winning. They're always winning. You're out here with a hoe that's basically a flat rock tied to a stick, trying to murder weeds faster than they can grow. It's like playing whack-a-mole with plants that have a personal vendetta against you. For every weed you kill, 3 more appear, probably laughing. Your wife and kids are all out here too. This is a family apocalypse. Your 6-year-old is pulling weeds with the determination of someone who understands that weeds equal death. Your wife is checking the barley, looking for signs of rust, a fungus that can destroy everything overnight. You're all constantly scanning for locusts, because why not add biblical plagues to the mix? The wheat field is your biggest concern. It's growing tall now, heavy with grain that isn't quite ready. This is when everything wants to eat it. Birds, obviously, but also deer, wild boar, and your neighbor's pigs that accidentally keep wandering into your field. You're sleeping out here now, not camping, surviving. You've built a small shelter at the edge of the field, and you take turns keeping watch. You've got a sling, some stones, and a righteous fury at anything that comes near your grain. You're basically a medieval security guard, except instead of a flashlight, you've got a torch, and instead of calling the cops, you're throwing rocks at things in the dark. July arrives like a slap in the face. It's harvest time for the winter wheat, and timing is everything. Too early and the grain isn't fully developed. Too late and it starts dropping seeds, or worse, a summer storm flattens everything you've worked for. You test the grain constantly, biting into kernels like some kind of wheat sommelier. Is it hard enough? Is it dry enough? You're looking for that perfect moment when it crunches just right, when the moisture content is low enough that it won't rot in storage, but high enough that it won't shatter when you harvest it. The entire village coordinates the harvest. This isn't a solo mission. It's D-Day for farmers. Everyone who can hold a sickle is in the fields. You're cutting wheat from dawn to past dusk, racing against time and weather. Your sickle is a curved blade that's been sharpened so many times it's half the size it started. Every swing matters. Cut too high, and you're leaving grain behind. Cut too low, and you're dulling your blade on dirt and stones. You develop a rhythm. Swing, grab, swing, grab, until your whole body moves like a machine that runs on desperation and barley water. Behind you, your wife and older children are binding the wheat into sheaves. They're working just as fast, twisting straw into rope, tying bundles that need to be tight enough to hold but loose enough to dry. It's an art form born from necessity. The heat is unbearable. You're drinking water that tastes like leather from the skin bag, eating bread that's more dust than grain, and your back feels like someone's been beating it with a club. But you can't stop. Every moment the wheat stands in the field is another moment when everything could go wrong. Then it happens. Clouds on the horizon. Dark ones. The kind that don't care about your harvest schedule. Everyone starts moving faster, panic disguised as efficiency. You're literally racing a storm, grabbing sheaves and running them to shelter, knowing that wet grain means mold, and mold means death. You make it. Barely. The rain starts just as you're dragging the last sheaves under cover. You're soaked, exhausted, and oddly exhilarated. You've just won a battle against nature. This time. Autumn. The reckoning. September hits different when your survival depends on it. The light is changing, getting that golden quality that would be beautiful if it wasn't a countdown timer to winter. Your spring barley and oats are ready now. The harvest process repeats, but this time you're tired. Bone-deep, soul-crushing tired. You've been working since March without a real break, and your body is starting to give opinions about that. But here's where medieval farming gets really interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely insane. It's threshing time. You've got all this grain in sheaves, but the actual edible part is locked inside husks like nature's most annoying puzzle. You need to beat the hell out of it to separate grain from straw. Enter the flail, 2 sticks connected by leather that you swing over your head and slam into piles of grain. For hours, days, weeks. You're in the barn, swinging this flail in a rhythm that becomes hypnotic. Whack, whack, whack. Dust fills the air so thick you can barely see. You've tied cloth over your nose and mouth, but you're still coughing up grain dust that's probably taking years off your life. Your arms feel like they're going to fall off. Your hands have blisters on top of blisters. The grain flies everywhere. You're literally beating food out of plants like they owe you money, which in a way, they do. After threshing comes winnowing. You take the beaten grain outside on a windy day and toss it in the air with a winnowing basket. The wind blows away the chaff, the light, useless bits, while the heavier grain falls back down. It's simple. It's elegant. It's also backbreaking when you're doing it with hundreds of pounds of grain. You're covered in chaff. It's in your hair, your clothes, your ears, probably your soul. You'll be finding bits of it months from now. But slowly, surely, you're accumulating piles of clean grain. Actual food. Now comes the tax man. Oh, you thought this grain was yours? Adorable. First, there's the tithe. 1/10 of everything goes to the church. Not negotiable. The priest shows up with measuring baskets and the kind of smile that says, God loves you, now pay up. Then there's your Lord's cut. Remember those fields you farmed for free? That was just the appetizer. He also gets a percentage of your harvest. The reeve measures it out while you watch, calculating how much bread that could have been. Then there's the miller's fee. Because you can't eat wheat kernels, you need them ground into flour. The miller takes a cut too, usually by having slightly sticky fingers when measuring flour back to you. Everyone knows it. No one can prove it. By the time everyone's taken their share, you're looking at your remaining grain like a dragon guard's gold. This has to last you until next harvest. This is your bread, your ale, your seed for next year, your emergency fund if someone gets sick. You store it carefully, obsessively. The grain goes into sealed jars and elevated wooden bins, anything to keep the mice and moisture out. You spread bay leaves and other herbs around to deter pests. You check it constantly for signs of mold or infestation. One bad batch could mean the difference between tight rations and starvation. October means plowing again. The cycle never stops. You're preparing fields for winter wheat, breaking up the earth that's been baked hard by summer sun. Your ox, Brutus, is even less enthusiastic than he was in spring. You're both running on fumes and stubbornness. But there's something different about autumn plowing. There's a resignation to it, maybe even a weird peace. You've survived another growing season. The barn has grain in it. Not a lot, but enough. Probably, hopefully. You're also collecting everything, and I mean everything. Acorns for the pigs and, in desperate times, for bread. Nuts from the forest, though technically those belong to your lord too. Mushrooms, if you know which ones won't kill you, and even then, it's a gamble. Your kids are sent out with baskets to gather anything edible before the frost claims it. The women are preserving everything they can. Your wife is pickling vegetables in precious salt, drying herbs, making the kind of decisions that would make doomsday preppers proud. That cabbage that's slightly rotten on one side? Cut off the bad bit, preserve the rest. Those apples with wormholes? They'll make cider just fine. November brings the slaughter. The animals you can't afford to feed through winter need to die now, while they're still relatively fat and before the cold preserves the meat. It's brutal, necessary, and weirdly festive. The whole village does it together, turning necessity into community. You're salting meat, smoking it, doing everything possible to make it last. The amount of salt required is staggering and expensive. Salt is basically medieval gold. You're using more salt to preserve one pig than a modern person uses in a year. Winter. The waiting game. December arrives with frost that turns your fields into iron. You wake up and your breath fogs inside your house. The thatched roof, which seemed so sturdy in summer, now lets in snow through gaps you never noticed. This is the season of careful mathematics. Every handful of grain, every piece of preserved meat, every stored turnip is counted against the days until spring. You're not living, you're rationing your way to survival. Your day starts with checking the animals. The ox, the chickens, maybe a pig if you're lucky. They're all crammed into a shelter that's barely warmer than outside. Sometimes they're in your house, separated by a flimsy partition, adding their body heat to your family's survival strategy and their smell to your daily experience. The ox needs feeding, but hay is limited. You're giving him just enough to keep him alive and strong enough for spring plowing. It's a horrible calculation. Too little, and he dies, losing you your most valuable farming tool. Too much, and you might have to eat him anyway when your family starts starving in February. You're repairing tools obsessively. That plow that barely survived the year? You're replacing the wooden parts, reinforcing the joints, trying to make it last another season. Your wife is spinning wool into thread, weaving cloth, patching clothes that are more patch than original fabric. Everyone's working, just differently. The days are short, brutally short. You're up before dawn doing chores by firelight, and darkness falls while you're still working. Candles are expensive, so you work by the fire's glow. Everyone crowded around the hearth like moths to the only warm spot in existence. January is when things get desperate. Your grain stores are depleting faster than you calculated. Someone's sick, they always are in winter, and needs extra food to recover. You're making bread with flour stretched with ground acorns, peas, sometimes even tree bark. It tastes like disappointment and sits in your stomach like a rock, but it fills the empty space. You're hunting, even though it's illegal. Your lord owns all the deer, all the wild boar, probably the rabbits too, but your kids are looking at you with hollow eyes, and suddenly the risk of losing a hand for poaching seems reasonable. You set snares in the dead of night, check them before dawn, and never, ever talk about the occasional meat that appears in your pot. The cold is endless. You're wearing everything you own simultaneously. Your children sleep in piles like puppies, sharing body heat under whatever cloth and furs you've managed to accumulate. You're burning dried cow dung when the firewood runs low, filling your house with smoke that makes everyone cough but at least keeps you from freezing. February is the killer. It's called the hunger gap for a reason. Last year's food is almost gone. This year's food doesn't exist yet. You're looking at seeds you saved for planting and having serious conversations about whether eating them now is better than starving before planting season. Your wife is making bread from things that shouldn't be bread: ground beans, dried peas, that emergency stash of chestnuts. Anything with calories gets ground up and baked into flat cakes that taste like survival. You're adding sawdust to bulk it up. Not enough to hurt, just enough to make your stomach think it's fuller than it is. The animals are suffering too. The chickens have stopped laying eggs. Your pig, if it survived the November slaughter, is looking at you like it knows what's coming. You're feeding them scraps that barely qualify as food, keeping them alive just long enough. You're also watching your neighbors, not in a creepy way, but in a "are they starving faster than us?" way. Because here's the brutal truth about medieval winter. If someone dies, their stored food gets redistributed. You hate yourself for the thought, but when old Henrik starts coughing that wet, rattling cough, you can't help but calculate how much grain his death would free up. March approaches like a distant promise. You're checking the ground constantly, waiting for it to thaw. You've survived another winter, barely. You're thinner, weaker, and somehow older than you were last year, but you're alive. And tomorrow you'll go back out to that field with your plow and your exhausted ox, and you'll do it all again. Because that's what you do. That's what your father did, and his father before him. The endless cycle. You stand at the edge of your field on a March morning that looks exactly like last year's March morning. Your ox, somehow still alive, somehow still annoyed, waits with the patient resignation of a creature that knows resistance is futile. Your children are older now. The youngest one, who used to chase birds with a stick, is now old enough to hold the plow steady while you guide it. Your eldest is getting married next month, which means losing a worker but also one less mouth to feed. These are the calculations that run your life. You've survived another year in a system designed to extract everything from you while giving back just enough to keep you functional. You'll give most of your grain to the Lord and church. You'll work their fields for free. You'll watch your children grow up bent from the same labor that bent you. But here's the thing. Nobody tells you about medieval farming. You're not just growing food. You're growing civilization itself. Every furrow you plow, every seed you plant, every harvest you bring in, you're part of an unbroken chain stretching from the first humans who figured out that seeds make plants, all the way to some distant future you can't even imagine. A future where machines do in hours what takes you months. Where hunger is a choice, not a season. Where farming is a business, not a death sentence. You don't know it, but your three-field system is revolutionary. Your careful seed selection is the beginning of agricultural science. Your communal harvests are creating the social bonds that will become towns, cities, nations. You're not just surviving, you're building the foundation that everything else stands on. The sun rises higher, your shadow shortens on the muddy ground. Somewhere a church bell rings, calling people to morning prayer. You cross yourself quickly. No sense in angering God when you need all the help you can get. And return to your plow. Your hands, scarred and calloused from years of this work, grip the worn wood. Your back, already aching before you've begun, prepares for another day of abuse. Your stomach, empty except for the weak ale and stale bread you broke your fast with, growls its familiar complaint. You look at the field stretching before you, acres of mud that need to become food. It's impossible. It's necessary. It's your life. You lean into the plow, feeling your weight transfer through the wood into the blade, into the earth. The soil breaks, dark and rich with promise and threat. Behind you, your son spreads seeds with the careful concentration of someone who understands that each grain could mean the difference between eating and starving. The wheel turns. The seasons change. The crops grow and die and grow again. And you endure. Not because you're strong or noble or particularly clever, but because that's what medieval farmers do. You endure, and in your endurance you feed the world. Even if that world forgets you were ever here, covered in mud, fighting the earth for every grain, living and dying by the turn of seasons that don't care about your struggles. You're a medieval farmer. You're the foundation everything else is built on. And tomorrow, if you're lucky, you'll wake before dawn and do it all again. Because if you don't, everyone starves. And that's how medieval farmers grew food during the 4 seasons, one back-breaking, soul-crushing, weirdly heroic day at a time.